Hi, I'm Richard Hale. I'm a Program Design and Delivery Officer here at TMAG, and we're in Islands to Ice, the Antarctic Gallery, because you can't visit us right now because of the coronavirus. So we're just going to show you a few things here today. Now, probably, if we're talking about wildlife in Antarctica, the most important animal that's the base of, well, not quite the base, but almost the base of a lot of the food chains is the krill, which is a small crustacean, so it's a member of that family that includes crabs and prawns and shrimps and lobsters, crayfish. There's one right here, which is a specimen in resin, and you can see that they're quite small. When you have a close look at it, you can make out its eyes, its little feeding appendages and its legs. And I've also got a big jar full of thousands of krill just here. Now, the reason that they're so important is that a lot of animals eat them. So things like a lot of the penguins, a lot of the seals, and of course the really big whales eat krill. The biggest animals living on the earth today eat some of these tiny animals. Well, a lot of these tiny animals, millions and millions of these tiny animals every day, some of them. Krill are amazing things in that a female can lay about 3,000 eggs every year. The eggs sink down about 1 kilometre into the ocean, and when they hatch, they rise up again. They're most common around the edge of the sea ice. And the other amazing thing about them, one of the other amazing things, is that if they don't get any food, they can go without food for about 200 days, these little things. And you know how a lot of invertebrates, like the animals without backbones, like crabs, spiders, those kinds of things, they shed their skin when they grow. A krill that's hungry, when it sheds its skin, which it does about once a month, instead of growing bigger, it can shrink. So it's an amazing adaptation to living in an environment like the Southern Ocean, where you might not get any food and you might need to conserve your energy and get smaller instead of bigger. I've got a little puppet krill here, which has what they call the feeding basket at the front. You can see some of the legs and the eyes. Now, their eyesight's not great, they can't read, but they notice the difference between light and dark. Now, to avoid predators, what they tend to do is sink down into the ocean a little bit during the daytime when there's a lot of birds and other animals patrolling on the surface. And then at night time, they tend to come up to closer to the surface of the ocean. So they have this sort of daily migration up and down in the water. There's a sign here about krill, and we can go over the sign and have a read of some of those other details. They can live to be, 5, 7 years old, so not very old. Their life cycle is pretty small, but there's billions and billions of them. And that's what a lot of those other animals rely on for food. Now, the biggest animal on Earth is the blue whale, the biggest living creature. And they can grow to over 30 metres long, so it's a massive thing compared to a krill. So you may ask, how does the biggest living animal on Earth catch tiny little animals? Now, I've got a model of a whale. It's not a blue whale, and it's not to scale, but you can have a look inside its mouth, and there's a whole lot of stuff hanging down inside its mouth. It's sort of like this giant moustache that some whales have inside their mouths, and it is actually made of the same stuff, the same material as our hair and our fingernails, and that material is called keratin, and the structure is called baleen, and this is a piece of baleen from a smallish whale. And these are pieces of baleen from a largish whale. So can you imagine if I had a great big moustache inside my mouth hanging down with hundreds of these sort of long fingernail-like pieces, hairy on the inside? It's like a great big strainer. You know, when you cook pasta at home, you boil the pasta up in a saucepan and then you put it in a strainer to get rid of all the water and you keep the good stuff. Well, that's what a whale does. It takes a great big mouthful of the water, full of krill, closes its mouth. The water goes out through the gaps between the baleen and the krill gets caught. And then it can lick the krill off with its massive tongue. And that's how they catch such tiny food. If you have a close look at the baleen, you can see that it's got little growth lines in it, which is just like the sort of lines that you might get on your fingernails. It's quite hard. It's a bit sort of plasticky. And I mean, in the past, you know, people have caught whales for a whole range of things, for meat, for blubber, but also for baleen to use in making various bits and pieces. Whalebone skirts, I think that framework in women's skirts in the olden days was often made out of whalebone because it's light and strong, just like some plastic. Now, not all whales have baleen and not all whales eat krill. There's kind of two broad groups of whales. If you have a look at this poster, the whales on the left-hand side facing the right are all baleen whales. The whales on the right-hand side facing the left are all whales with teeth. And I've got some examples of those here as well. This is the skull of a long-finned pilot whale. Now, pilot whales are pretty well known around Tasmania because they're one of the most common whales that strand. The whales with teeth use echolocation. They make a sound in the water that bounces off their food or the environment so they can navigate around, a bit like how a bat finds its way around at night. Sometimes their echolocation gets confused because of a low sloping beach, or they might be sick or something and they might strand on the beach. And this does happen to a lot of long-fin pilot whales. But this is the skull. It's quite big, but not as big as a great big sperm whale or something like that. If you have a close look, you can see where the blowhole will be, and the hole's coming up here to make the blowhole. And if you have a close look on the bottom of the skull, so this is the top of the skull, yeah? You can see the teeth. So this is the bottom, the underneath of the top jaw, and you can see where the teeth would be. So this is the skull of the longfin pilot whale. Now, if you compare how big the teeth of the pilot whale would be to this one, this is a massive big tooth. And this is a tooth from the biggest toothed whale, the sperm whale. So in many ways, it's kind of like the biggest hunting animal on Earth. It's not as big as a blue whale, and sure, the blue whale hunts krill, but the sperm whale, it grows to about 18 metres long, and it hunts prey that are the same length. It hunts the biggest invertebrate animal on Earth. So the biggest animal on Earth that doesn't have a backbone is hunted by this sperm whale. Do you have any idea what that is? I've got a little bit in a jar, which might give you a clue. So this is part of a prey item for a sperm whale, and if you have a really close look, you can see some sort of suckers on a bit of it. It's part of the tentacle of a colossal squid or a giant squid. Now, so giant squid or colossal squid, they live at really deep depths down in the ocean. The sperm whales take huge number of breaths, hold their breath, sometimes for hours, dive right down deep into the ocean and find these things using echolocation, using their sonar. Grab them, have these massive fights. If you see sperm whales, they're always covered with scars from the giant squids attacking them. And they use their great big teeth to grab onto their prey. Now I've got another trick question for you. Do you reckon this tooth is from the top jaw of a sperm whale or the bottom jaw of a sperm whale? Any ideas? Sperm whales only have teeth in their bottom jaw. So it's the bottom jaw. It's a tooth from a sperm whale. So imagine the story that this tooth has. It's been in a giant whale. It's been diving down into the dark ocean where you can't see a thing, great pressure, freezing cold, and grabbing onto giant squid, and then dragging them back up to the surface after a big struggle. I've got a couple of other bits and pieces just to give you some idea of the scale of the size of a whale. If you feel the bumps down your back, you can feel your vertebrae, your backbone. Now this is one of the vertebrae from not a really huge whale, from something like a humpback or a southern right whale, one of the whales that we might see around Tasmania in the ocean, sort of about now, in the autumn time, when they're moving from the colder waters further south, travelling back up to warmer waters north of here, where they have their babies. So look at the size of that vertebrae. There's also the disc in between the vertebrae, massive. And another way to get an idea of the scale of a whale, the size of it, is to compare it with our own bodies. Here's my hand. This is one of the small bones from the wrist of a whale. It's probably from a sperm whale, one of those really big ones that hunts the squid. So we're talking about these huge animals, the whales. Some of them eat huge prey, like the giant squid. Other ones eat those really tiny prey, like the krill. Thanks for coming. We'll see you again soon.